Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Mondays with Micah. I just have to say that this is our second time. Terry and I getting together. We had a wonderful conversation earlier this week, and I felt like it was a full success. And in technical difficulties, somehow the sound was not there at all. I've heard this on many other podcasts and different things like that where they had to re-record, and this is one of those times. So thank you, Terry, for coming back again and walking through her story. And we have bumped into each other over the last probably couple years. She has been to our fall festival, Spring Fest, and where we have had a booth, and she's come through and we've chatted, but I have not had the opportunity to really sit down with her. And this lady is a wealth of knowledge. She has been through some things, and I'm hoping that she will be able to meet with some of you in our widows group to be able to share some of what she has learned. But this is a first here on the show where we have had a police wife on the scene. And once again, it is another story of sudden loss. And so I'm going to hand that over to you, whether you want to go back, how you met, how long you've known each other, some of your life before, and then how it began.
All right. Well, hello, I'm Terri Phillips. I am a widow of almost 18 years. We would have been married 35 years this year had he not been killed in the line of duty. We were high school sweethearts. So I met him at 16. We graduated high school. He went right into the Air Force. And a year later, we got married and had been married 17 years when he was shot and killed in the line of duty. And I am a police wife. My mom is a police wife. My dad was a chief of police and a sergeant for a small town. My sisters are married to police officers. We come from a police officer type family and also a family that serves in the military. So my mother never really raised us to be that anxious about dad going to work. So when my husband decided after he served in the Air Force for 4 years that he was going to go into policing, there was not a big anxiety for me about that. It was like, do what you have to do because that's your passion.
Yeah.
And he got me through my passion. So which is nursing. So we when he was in the basic training in the military, our best friend, who was 16 at the time, I was 17, he was killed in an ATV accident. And I was the first responder on the scene. I was an EMT in training at the time. And he died from traumatic brain injury. That was my first experience with death. And I do believe that there are good things that happen from bad things, and that, you're put in a certain path for a reason. And I believe that I was there that day because that's what got me into nursing. And so I started nursing in 1992. So I've been a nurse for a really long time, did the emergency room and critical care for many years. But when Mike was shot and killed, I kind of lost that wall that nurses have, that we can be professional and not emotional when we're telling people about death and dying, because I did deal with death and dying every day in the emergency room.
And what do you think it was about that first encounter that sparked you in a way to pursue that as a vocation?
So I loved being in the EMT and training. I thought that there was a huge passion for me in that, just caring for people and helping people. But when he was killed, he was transported to emergency room before they pronounced my friend. And the nurses were only allowing family to come back at the time. And the nurse just looked at me and she's like, "This is your best friend?" And I'm like, "Yes." And she's like, "Come back." And she snuck me back. And I think her kind of breaking the rules a little bit made me think, like, this is what I want to do. I want to help people, but break the rules in the process. So
wow.
I got in a lot of trouble in critical care because I would always sneak families in past visiting hours.
So you're one of the good nurses, we call it.
Yep. It's sometimes the rules don't make sense. And
yes.
And, I understand that in nursing, there's things that you have to go through, but this is somebody's loved one.
Well, and this is something that did not come up in the first conversation,
Right.
but my close girlfriend, she lost her husband to COVID.
Oh, yeah.
And it
That
was
an awful time.
in 2021.
Mm.
So they both got it,
but
he had pre-existing conditions, and he was COVID conscious. Went about a year, and it was February of 2021, and she wasn't allowed in the room.
Oh yeah,
and they had to do a iPad FaceTime to make the choice to intubate.
Yeah.
And he said, I will do it for 3 days. And by that point, the COVID lung had done its damage. And he was also 42. I mean, he was young. And so that, for a mother to have to face those decisions in that way, she felt like, where was the hold harmless? Where was these forms that you could sign to say, like, you're not going to sue the hospital? There wasn't things like that. I'm like, this is not humane. Exactly.
No, yeah, it's I look at things like, and I think most widows do. You have the life prior to being a widow, and then you have the life after. I look at COVID the same way.
Right,
I think
too.
COVID is very traumatic for a lot of people,
Yes.
especially those who ended up in the hospital and not seeing their loved ones and family members.
Right.
You have that life before COVID and life after.
Right. And I feel like the life after has been harder.
Right.
Period.
Yeah. And I think healthcare, and I'm a nurse, but we were talking about healthcare. I think healthcare has not come out of the right end of this. They're not looking at patients as human beings. And it's more like the dollar sign and what we can plug into them to keep them coming back. And that's a whole nother topic. But,
yes. And you've heard me say this, sometimes when I was walking through my breast cancer journey, that it's the wild, wild west.
Right.
That's what I call it. Western medicine is the wild, wild west. And it's wild and it feels topsy-turvy. And I'm thankful for the Western medicine because we live in the West.
Right.
And so there are certain protocols that we need, and I do believe we can handle. But something that I tell myself as a mom is that just because we can doesn't mean we should.
Right.
And that I am a defiant patient, if you want to say. I'm a difficult patient, is more of the word. But really, an advocate and an informed patient should be asking questions. But I do find that the doctors don't want you to ask questions because they don't always have the answers.
Right.
And if you get into functional medicine and some more holistic approach, which I truly believe is the way, we should look at the whole body before we start to pinpoint certain things.
Right.
And so Terri and I have had a little bit of conversation about, I do truly kind of believe that some of these medications are more of a, like what you would call a beta blocker or something. That is what they're doing to our brain. It's telling us, hey, you're not in as much pain as you think you are.
Right.
Where we think it's actually healing the pain.
Right.
It is suppressing the pain.
Right.
And that is not the same thing, folks. That is not the same thing. And what happens over time is that you become dependent on these pills, which is not the purpose of the pills.
No.
The purpose of these pills, I know people today that are in liver failure or cirrhosis of the liver due to taking too long of pain meds that has now affected organs in their body. That is something we did not talk about, the health component of this, but I am so passionate about realizing that people would drink coffee on an empty stomach. They would take their, pain meds with very minimal food. Well, that is what happens. It's stripping the lining of your stomach.
Right.
They said our gut health and our brain are related.
Yes.
Like the functionality of our brain and the function of our gut are intertwined. And so that affects the stomach,
Yes.
that affects the colon, that affects the liver, the kidney. All of these things need to be in harmony, folks, for us to feel at optimal health. And I will tell you that I thought I was functioning in optimal health, and then my husband passed.
Yeah.
And suddenly, pain started to find me in the joint, in the muscle. And I know you've heard me say this, that our issues are in our tissues.
Yeah.
And it's that the fascia of the body, the more we learn about this, and maybe Terri can share a little bit more, the fascia is holding on to things. Mm-hmm. And there is this fluid. We are what, 70% water. Yes. The skin is the biggest organ of our body, not just the importance of the liver or the kidney. We need them all. You know, the scripture talks about that every part matters. And and ones that are unseen may have more significance than the ones that are seen. Right. So this has been a turning point since COVID, because I don't know about you, but COVID attacked the weakest part. Right. And for me, that was my back. Mm. And it went fully inflamed. So I actually never lost my taste with COVID. Oh. I didn't have the lung issue with COVID. Well, that was encouraging to me as a singer to know my lungs were strong. Right. But where it attacked was my back. And it felt like fully on fire. But then I did get it a second time, and I had more brain fog with the second time of it. So it was icky, okay? Mm-hmm. All of that was very ick. And, the flu, all the things. And I do tell people now, because we have that context, that the widow's fog, the brain fog, right, is, I said, if you can take the COVID fog, if you had that with the flu, that is the physiological things that it feels like to be a widow in the early days. Right. I had never heard it discussed. And, maybe Terri will share a little bit too about that. We were kind of raised that you just keep on. Yes. This keeping on is what you do. Right. And, but I found that just keeping on and ignoring these alarms that are going off was killing me softly, if you want to say. Right. Can you speak into that?
Well, sure. So we are parents. I have two sons. They were 7 and 10 when Mike was killed. He was shot and killed when he was 37 years old. I was 36-year-old widow. And, as I described it, you have the life before and the life after. The life after, your mom, you are suppressing all of those emotions and taking on and keeping on to raise your children, because we're parents and that's what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. We just lost our husband. We're going to take care of everybody else, especially our children. Mm-hmm. And so there's a
heightened need to take care.
Extremely heightened need. Yeah. And so, for me, for my health journey, I started immediately having insomnia when Mike was shot and killed. It was 11:14 p.m. on a Thursday night. And so I got the knock on the door around 2:00 in the morning with the chief and the pastor. And I knew right away, like the look on their faces, I just knew right away that my husband was now gone. And my babies were upstairs sleeping. They're 7 and 10, but they're still my babies. Mm-hmm. And they were upstairs sleeping. And immediately my focus went to, what can I do to help them? But the whole time I'm just crying. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't crying hysterically, because we were always taught at a young age where I grew up that those are emotions that you keep subtle, because your father is the chief of police, or he is a sergeant. He was also the vice chief of the fire department. So we had many roles, and we always had to, make sure that we didn't act out or look bad in public, that you had this public persona. So it was very aware in my mind that even though I'm crying, I'm trying to do it subtly so that I don't embarrass anybody, especially myself, because, you become the stoic person. And so I noticed 3 days into just crying, and after we told the boys that they lost their dad, I still could not stop crying. And an officer came up to me, and he was like, have you been doing this the whole time? Have you slept at all? And I'm like, no. And they silently had a physician assistant come look at me, and he prescribed me a medication, a benzodiazepine. It's called Ativan. And I took this medicine. I was reluctant to take it. I thought maybe I was strong enough and I didn't need to. I absolutely needed to, because as soon as I took it, that incredible pressure that I was feeling, this immense grief that was so soul deep, it eased up a little bit for me to breathe. And so I wasn't just crying, and I could talk, because I'm an ugly crier where my voice gets kind of squeaky, and you can't really articulate the way you want to, because you're just dealing with these incredible emotions. And so, so great, that medicine was wonderful, but what it did was that it allowed me to suppress even more all my pain and my feelings, to just keep getting through. So, you get through the funeral, and you get through the next steps, and you get through the next steps. And then I found that I was suddenly having really bad brain fog, and the doctor's explaining that as, well, you're grieving. And I was like, well, my bones are hurting. Oh, ma'am, you're grieving. And, I was having chest pain. Well, that's anxiety. And shortness of breath, ma'am, that's anxiety. Or I have a history of asthma. That's your asthma. And, fast forward a couple of years, I ended up getting a chest x-ray, and they found nodules in my lungs. So they were worried I had leukemia. My lymph nodes were really inflamed, and it ended up being a rare autoimmune disease called sarcoidosis. Sarcoidosis produces these granulomas throughout your body. Granulomas are like little rice, little tiny pieces of rice, but it's like white blood cells that are all clumped together, and they produce like little masses that you can kind of relate as a tumor, but it's not cancerous. And it mostly affects people in their lungs, but for me, it's everywhere. It's in my brain, my heart, my liver, my spleen, my bones, pretty much everywhere. I have these little masses growing. And if you can just imagine that hitting your nerve pain, that your nerves, it triggers nerve pain. And so your whole body just feels like you have the flu all the time, and you have brain fog. And then for me, I was getting these really incredibly horrific migraines. And of course, in the beginning, I was like, oh, well, that's just me grieving because I was crying. And come to find out, I just have a lot of these in my brain. And so we get I'm a nurse, and I'm good at advocating for other people, but I wasn't very good at advocating for myself in the beginning. And I would be like, oh yes, okay, yep, I'm grieving. You're right, that's fine. And I would ignore it even longer. And then at one point I kept saying to the doctor, I know I'm still grieving, but I don't feel like this is grief.
Right.
And it was the same thing as like, of course I was depressed, but I never fell into a massive depression. It wasn't my personality to be depressed. I have a strong faith in God. And I just, of course you have periods of sadness, but I never felt that depression where I had one person say to me, if this happened to me and this was my husband, I would just put myself in a closet and never get out of the closet. And I looked at her and I was like, I have children. That's not an option for me.
Right.
I have to make sure. My focus became, what can I do to make this 7 and 10-year-old become functional people in society, and not use their grief as an excuse to dip into things like drugs and alcohol and smoking and all the things you don't want your children to do as a parent. But you certainly would be like empathetic if they did fall into that route, because they just had something horrifically traumatic happen to them at 7 and 10.
And I felt similar, that I felt this defiance within myself that they would not be the statistic that was common. Let's say that, like, oh, well, it's, we don't want to say, I'm not surprised, but, they don't have a father and these things. And so the amount of comments that people can make, and my fighter in me is like, do you know how many children are in counseling today due to their fathers?
Right.
So do not project onto me. Yes, let me just make this clear. I do believe that the ultimate family unit is with both. But there are many unhealthy family units that have both. and they did more damage being in their life than not.
Right.
So do not project onto me that you know anything about it, especially if you haven't walked through it. And there are many of you who did have mothers who, and I have walked with friends who the children had to become the adults,
right,
because the parents checked out.
Right, right.
And that wasn't for 1 year, that like a decade, like
Right.
They really didn't come out of it. And we couldn't believe that they were that dependent on the other spouse.
Right.
When, so it can go either way. It can affect the men in a way when their wives pass in a hard way, or it can affect the women where their identity but is really so intertwined in it that you can't see your future without them in it.
Right.
And therefore you have no future.
Right.
Because they're not in it.
And I feel like that could have happened to me because my family unit, if you will, was my husband, who was my best friend. We, were 16 when we met each other. We graduated high school. We went to junior, senior prom together, and then got married a year later. And we had been married 17 years. He was my best friend. And I was working as a nurse. I worked 3 12-hour shifts. And he was a police officer, so he worked 12-hour shifts, and we just alternated. So our children did not have a babysitter. We just lost a lot of sleep because it was important for us to make sure that the safety of our children was top priority, because we worked in a field where we saw a lot of horrific, traumatic things happen in daycares, and not all daycares are bad, but we just saw that type of thing that were just like, nope, we're going to do what we can. And so the night that he was shot and killed, the chief of police said to me as I'm crying, and again, it's 2:00 in the morning, and he's like, can we call your best friend? And I just cried harder, because my husband was my best friend. And while I had friends that were girls and acquaintances, I didn't have that soul connection with another person that wasn't my husband. So I guess you could really say we were codependent with each other, but so I could have easily fallen into that. I'm going to go into the closet. My life is ending. But I've always been a better mother than a wife. Like my children were the sole existence for my entire life, as far as let's make sure that these two beautiful boys are good people and good members of society. And, so I instantly remember, and I didn't share with you this last time, but I said to the chief, I'm like, can we talk to somebody, like a counselor? Like it's 3 a.m. now. Because I have to tell these boys that their dad died, and I don't want to do it in a way that's going to traumatize them. And I had a little enough knowledge to be scary as a nurse that if you said a certain thing that you were going to traumatize your child more. So can we call somebody? And they found a counselor who walked me through the phone at 5 a.m. Is on the phone saying, this is what's going to happen. And so for my 7-year-old, they're like, yep, he understands death. They're going to understand it's permanent. But what's going to happen is they're going to have possible separation anxiety. They're going to worry that everybody around them is going to die, and that they're not going to want you out of their sight. And then for my 10-year-old, he was like, they truly do understand death is a permanent state, and that he may show more emotions of anger, and that he will also too have the separation anxiety or worry that something's going to happen to you, and what's going to happen to me if now both of my parents are gone. And so that actually came very true. My 7 and 10-year-old, suddenly it was, are you okay? Are you safe? So my husband was killed in August 7th of 2008. The boys went to school in September.
Right.
That was incredibly difficult. They did not want to leave my sight. They were so convinced and so worried that something was going to happen to me. And even prior to that, because my husband was a police officer, and the people that shot and killed my husband, they were worried that they might have connections with other people that may want to do my family harm. So we were under a gentle protection, if you will. We had a police officer that stayed in a patrol car outside of my house for what seemed like 4 weeks. and we had an escort for a while whenever we went out in public.
Because there was a lot of news people and things
there
in the
was
beginning.
Oh yeah, so I was saying in the last interview that for me it was emotionally traumatic, because you're not grieving alone in public, or I'm sorry, you're not grieving alone with just your family and friends. This is a news story, and so the news cameras and media people were surrounding my house. They had to actually, the police officer had to block the roadways. We had a privacy fence, like a 6-foot privacy fence. They took their news vans, parked it outside the privacy fence, got a letter, and was videotaping my backyard where my 10-year-old son was throwing a baseball, because that was his way to deal with his anger. His dad was a baseball coach. And so that's what he did for hours out of the day. And one of the officers realized what was happening. And I just thought, can you not just give us a moment to grieve?
Totally.
You know, and but I'm also very aware, like I was like, okay, well, this is a big news story and stuff, so we got to look at it from two sides. But I was very hurt by, how invasive it was. And then even people with good intentions, and I'm sure this happens with a lot of widows, is you'll have people just come out from everywhere with these good intentions to help, and sometimes they're not as helpful as they could be. And I had such great support from the law enforcement community. I had wonderful support from the community in general. People we didn't even know would stop us and be like, I saw you're that lady on the news. Whose husband was killed. We saw your funeral, because it was televised publicly. And so for me, I never had an anxiety being out in a large group of people. The night of the viewing, if you will, it was held at Rock Church. And Rock Church is huge in Virginia Beach. And that's where most of the police officer funerals are held. And it holds thousands of people. And there were thousands of people at Mike's funeral. The viewing the night before, we stood in line for 4 hours while people came and gave their condolences. And my 10-year-old son felt like he was the man of the house. He had heard people saying that to him. Well, you're the man of the house. Now, as a mother, I was like, are you kidding me? Don't tell my 10-year-old son that. But my 10-year-old was a very mature 10-year-old, and he took that to heart. He stood next to me for 4 hours, would not leave my side. And I think that also came with that separation anxiety. Well, if I'm by her side, nothing's going to happen. I'm going to be the protector now of the family. So there was many times as he got older, I had to say to him, you are still the child, and it's not your job to protect your mother.
Right.
But yeah, so all those people coming and hugging you and giving their condolences, I suddenly had an aversion to people coming up and hugging me. It was because I just threw me right back into
trigger
the funeral and the
intensity of
those emotions. Yeah. And it took me a really long time. It's been 17, almost 18 years now. And I still, if a stranger comes up to give me a hug, I immediately tense up. And I don't mean to do it. It's just, I know it's going to be a trigger.
And we would call that complex PTSD.
Yes.
And these are the complexities of, you're really not just, I don't feel like enough of us know even what that is, other than there was an event, and then there's all these small things that happen after that collectively create more of a nervous system dysregulation. You get dysregulated in your normal way of doing things. She may never have had a problem with hugging before that point, but when there is sudden things pushed on you, and it doesn't really stop. So it's like 4 hours was abnormally long. Okay, that is not typical. And even looking back on some of these things, it's like, why did we do that? Why did we agree to do that? But there is an energy in those beginning days. There is this cortisol spike that you go on, which is the fight or flight. So it is a real thing for your body. But what we both have learned, that is not a state that is sustainable.
Right.
It is draining you of all of your strength in different ways and different levels. And it does subside, and people would sometimes call that the crash of sort, like where,
right.
And people were looking for that with me, that like the shoe had to drop at some
Right.
point, because there was this heightened state. But the unique thing about my husband's story is that when you were talking about that pressure on your chest,
Right.
we all had it as a church congregation because he was the pastor's son. And it was such a sudden loss that it really felt like an insult to us all. It was a
Right.
blindside to
Right.
us all.
Right.
And thankfully, I can say that for us, church was a safe place.
Right.
And so for 17 days, he died in year 17. We had been together, married 13 years, but had been dating 17 years. So that number is coming up here. And my father-in-law preached a whole series about the 17. It's the overcomer. It's being an overcomer is what's associated with number 17 for us. And there's more if you Google about 17. But anyway, being an overcomer. And so we did 17 days of praise every day from 6 to 7. We gathered. And I didn't have the language then, but I'm like, it helped us get our breath back. Like, we didn't realize we couldn't breathe, but that became our safe place. And as I would say today, there's a podcast that's on YouTube from another worship leader, and she calls it "Worship is My Weapon." And that became mine.
Right.
Worship was the way through. Worship also became a weapon, because when you get hit with things in your home, and as she alluded to earlier with talking to someone else, and she said, if this would have happened to me, I would have gone in the closet and stayed there. Well, as mothers with young children, there was no closet. I don't have a walk-in closet in this really anyway. So, practically speaking, there was no like hiding out.
Right.
But worship had been so instilled, and then seeing how much power there is to praise, and how it shifts our mood and it shifts our brain. And so there's so much more. Dr. Leaf, is a neurologist, science lady. Caroline Leaf, I think is her name. There's people starting to get the research out of just what happens when prayer comes into a neurological level. So these things have been around, but we're getting the science behind it to really quantify what's really happening, and that it's not just a Christianese thing to say you should go and worship and pray more. There's actually a physiological and a neurological thing that happens when we pray and when we praise. And really, you can't typically praise in a depressed state.
No.
And so as I'm saying here, there is these life hacks. We're finding different ones. She has others, but for me, it started there. It is part of my passion, pursuit. It changed how I worship in our church, because it's not just singing songs that we like the beat to anymore. It's not just pretty words. These words have weight to them.
Right.
And that weight can change your day. It can change your outlook. It can change your mood. It can change your sight of what you're looking at, because we go so inward in this grief state. It's, you're seeing the loss. Right. And I heard on the radio one of those little clips where they'll have a preacher sometime, and I don't even remember who said it, but he said, you can focus on the lost, or you can focus on who's left.
Right.
And that's what you had to do. You had to focus on your kids, even if it kind of put you last. And again, folks, I'm sounding an alarm here. Terri is another example to prove my point. Not that I want to be right, that we are our best advocate in the health community. When you don't feel normal, that doesn't mean you're crazy. Right. That means that something is not in balance, and that may be something minor, or it could be something major. Our fear is that if we go, they're going to find something major. What I'm here to tell you is the sooner you go when things feel off, the probability of it being major is pretty low.
Right.
But when you go 2 years, 3 years, still trying to figure out what it is and getting this runaround, if you want to call it, where like, I'm sorry,
you're grieving.
You're acting crazy because of this. They're making a judgment call in a 15-minute period of time a lot of times. They're never doing a full blood panel. They're not doing a lot of things to tell more of the story. You don't have the facts. You're trying to go to the people who are supposed to help you get the facts. And I'll tell you personally that when I found people who actually could help, I would be emotional.
Right.
Because I'm like, you can actually help me?
I think there is absolutely truth to medical gaslighting, and it is so much worse for women. Again, in the medical world, we didn't even start studying women as part of statistics until 1980s. And there's this
That's not that long ago.
No, it's not. And there's this major mentality of whiny women disease. I've heard doctors reference it. If they can't figure out in a 5-second, 10-second period, which is more like 5 to 10 minutes when they're with you, if they can't figure out what it is, they're going to sit there and be like, oh, well, she must have had a trauma childhood, or she's grieving for whatever reason.
Whiny women's disease.
Yeah,
okay.
Well, and I've heard that. I've been in the emergency room where I've had a doctor more than once say, oh, that woman in there's nothing wrong with her. She's just got whiny woman syndrome. And
which is basically a hypochondriac.
Right. And I remember this lady, and I remember this lady coming back months after months of just complaining of really bad back pain, and nobody was listening to her. And where do you go when nobody listens to you? You go to the emergency room. And finally, one of the female doctors did an x-ray of her back, and she had a tumor in her back. She wasn't whining at all. She was in pain, and they just ignored her. Right. And I'm not saying all physicians are like that. I'm just saying
it happens.
It happens. And if you have something in your medical list of complaints, like, you're a young widow or a widow in general, or you have anxiety, or somebody has diagnosed you with stress, or even if you have acid reflux, they're going to say, well, that was stress, so you must be stressed. And they're going to try to gaslight you into going into a direction when you know your body more than anybody else does. So you need to be in tune to it. And if you think it's something that needs a little bit more evaluation, then get a second opinion.
Get a third opinion.
We
know it costs money. Okay. We know it costs money. And some of these things that you may be looking into are not within your insurance plans, and it can limit you. The highest level of wealth and riches we have is our health, folks. We can't do for other people if we don't have that. And to slight ourselves, and what I find too, Terry, is that there's a worth attached to it. Are you worth paying to pursue these things that are out of pocket or out of the network, they'll call it? The answer is yes. Yes, you are. You're worth it to pursue it, because and I know for me, it's almost a physical thing. When they hit the nose, when they diagnose, when they call it what it really is, there's something that happens to me personally. I almost get chills,
or get validated. Oh my gosh, there's something.
That's it.
There's truth behind this.
She's not going to keep going to other doctors. Right. I mean, why do we go to other doctors? Because something isn't adding up. Okay. But when it adds up, we will be satisfied with that. And it may not be what you want to hear. Okay. That is why I think there's a lot of fear around going to the doctor, because there is these perceptions that they're going to give you a diagnosis, whether you really have one or not. Or they're going to prescribe the wrong thing or overdose. There's things that happen where our bodies can be more sensitive. Again, some people can handle synthetic drugs. Some people can't. There's this whole methylation thing. How do you absorb even supplements? Are you really absorbing it? We're paying a lot of money. Do you even know if you absorb properly or not? we can say, well, how do you feel after you take it? I'm like, well, not really that different. Well, maybe I have an absorption issue. I haven't even fully done a test on that. So there are things that are not really standard of care that is affecting your care. And the standard of care does not fit the however many millions of women in this country. One size doesn't fit all of us.
Right.
One medication can't work for every single one. That's why there's all these different birth controls. That's why there's all these different things. So that is a real thing that the women, I think, thank you for these terms that you're bringing to the show here about gaslighting, that they if you come in a stressed state, they give it back to you. And we have to remember that we don't know what these doctors or this physician's day was.
Right.
And if we're the 14th person they've seen that day, we're not getting them at their best. And to assume that they know everything is not smart, y'all. It is not wise for us to assume. We need to sit down and really sit with some of the things. And I have experienced gaslighting, and it came in the form of fear. And it felt like an insult, an assault, not an insult. It was more than an insult. It felt like an assault, because they were declaring things that if you don't do this, this will happen to you. And I was like, hold up. Okay, like, who do you think you are saying this stuff to me? And I didn't have another person in the room to witness it, but it was a male talking to a female. And I was like, you know, and it took me days to like shake it off.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was so in shock of it. Like, I'm coming to you for help.
Right.
And you're coming back with me with these scenarios. It was just so mind-boggling, Terri. I was like, this is not kind. People are coming in here really suffering, and you want to give a statistic to give me peace that that's going to fix it?
Right.
It wasn't enough information for me.
Right.
Now, there may be those of you, and we're not saying it's wrong, that the statistic that they give you is enough. But for me, I said, well, okay, here you have this group of women that you've tested this thing. What was their backstory?
Right.
They don't know.
Right.
Well, they were women between 45 and that's what they know. Well, that's not enough for me to quantify that I fit into that category.
Right, right.
Does that make sense?
No, it's perfect sense. And you have to also remember that a lot of the studies out there are studies from pharmaceutical companies that pick their study group. And so you're not necessarily getting a valid study. And I'm not saying that happens to every study. I'm just saying you have to know what source is your research coming from, who did this research, because we're no longer in a world today where we can just take a person in a white coat and say they know everything and they must know what's best for you. Some of them absolutely know a lot, and some of them might have your best interests in the forefront, but some of them may not. There are a lot of pharmaceutical companies that give physicians perks for prescribing things, and it might not necessarily be the best prescription for you, but that's what they're going to push because they get a perk from it.
That's right. There's money involved, folks.
Yes.
And that dictates your care. I know this is not where Terri thought the conversation was going to go here today. But when there has been a finding that widows are not just suffering emotionally, they're suffering physically. And we have to continue to shower and continue to put on a little lipstick and rouge and pretend we're still upstanding citizen in this community. There is a stigma for ourselves. You can call it pride, that we want to show the community we still got it, that we can do this with or without a spouse, and it's at our expense. At least it has been for me. And I've had, when I got sick a second with this breast cancer thing, so that was like halfway into this whole 9 years, whatever. And someone said to me, you don't have anything to prove. You don't need to prove yourself, Micah.
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like, you don't even know you're doing that. Like, but when my husband passed, I did go into that super mom mode.
I have to prove to the world that I can still do this, even though I'm not longer, in a couple format, but a single parent.
Right.
Because I think for me, that first time someone called me a single parent, it just devastated me because I still felt married. There's so many negative feelings when somebody calls you a single mom and they don't know your backstory or how you all of a sudden became a single parent.
Right.
I don't know if that's how you felt, but for me, it was such a shock to my system to suddenly be grouped into this category. And you also,
that you had your own thoughts of.
Right. And you didn't necessarily, like, nobody wants to wake up and say, I want to be a widow today. And now I'm in this widow group. Great. And there is a widow group called Concerns for Police Survivors out there. I struggled really hard trying to talk with these women and get involved in the group because I didn't want to be in the group. And I didn't want to need their help. I thought I'm going to be able to do this on my own. And I am very grateful for the resources that they had out there. And I did meet some wonderful women who are sharing similar experiences. There is so much value into what Mike is doing because when you share your stories, other people are like, I'm not so alone.
Right.
Or I had that feeling too.
Yeah.
And
you didn't share it because there's icky feelings or emotional feelings. Again, if you grew up in a family household where you really had to suppress them, is the term that you, and what I can say is even like tears, I didn't really show a lot of tears.
Right.
And there were people like, well, what's wrong with you, Micah, that you don't cry about things? And I'm like, crying is so exhausting to me that I don't like that. I don't like the sensation. And, so you have friends that watch a movie or a commercial and they're tearing up. Well, I'm not one of those people that it's like tears is serious kind of thing. And so it was a running joke that my friends that had known me 20 years on one hand, however times they ever saw me cry.
Right.
So that hasn't been the case since my husband passed. So that dam kind of broke open in a way that it needed to break open because I feel like I was stuffing a lot of things down and like, it wasn't so bad. You just kind of have this, well, we got through it. You marginalize the pain of previous experiences because to acknowledge the pain is even more painful.
Right, exactly.
And so, but trauma has a way of not just having the present pain become very aware. It pulls up all the other stuff, and all this stuff's flying in the stratosphere of your brain and your body. You're thinking about this in the past, and now you're feeling triggered about something else you hadn't thought of in 20 years because the brain has a way of compartmentalizing certain things for us to survive and to keep moving forward. That's the miraculous of it, y'all. But there are times that when you slow down, and I've heard a lot of people say, I don't like the quiet. Because the voices in my head gets really loud.
Right.
And what do you do with that, Terri? What do you do with all the voices?
So for me, I found my faith. I had faith prior to my passing. It wasn't the strongest, but I believed in heaven. I had to, my friend, he died, and then we had a pregnancy that we lost. And that was the most devastating loss I had ever experienced. So if I can ever say the word depression, losing a baby was the most depressing thing for me. But I found my faith and I moved on. There's a book called I'll Hold You in Heaven. And that book, I think, helped me get through the loss of my husband because it helped me get through the loss of my baby.
Yeah.
So I had that background. So I do believe that things happen in your life and there's a path that you're facing and how you choose to walk that path. I choose to walk in faith and say, okay,
Awesome.
okay, God didn't take my friend away, but because I was there on scene, it made me become a nurse, and I saved other people's lives. And I didn't lose my baby because it wasn't a God thing that happened. I lost my baby and it was a sad thing, but because I lost my baby, another nurse brought this book into my life that eventually helped me with my husband's death. And that's how I get through things, is just this horrific event happened, let's find the positive in it. Let's see what I can do with my faith. But as the years go on, I find I have much more strength in I pray a lot to God. I journal a lot. I found that helped a lot with grieving, is just journaling and writing your thoughts down.
And didn't you say you had like 2 different
ones? So I have a journal of what's happening in life, and then a journal where it's just like I write my prayer out. And I had to have the journal of what's happening in life just because there's so much brain fog, and because of my medical autoimmune disease, I have brain fog. So if I don't write it down, I'm kind of like, okay, did that happen Monday? Did that happen Thursday? Or where were we? And that's a very common thing for new grieving people to do. But for me, I just learned that it's so much easier to be like, because it would drive me nuts not to remember, did I do this? Did I not do this? So I just have like a little, you did this today, or, this happened today type of moment. And
that's a skill. Okay. So that's a life hack for those that, when we say grief has a way of kind of blowing your brains a little bit, and there is focus issues. That is a real cognitive impairment. It is temporary. Some last longer than others. I think depending on the weight of the grief in your life, and like there's something that is more shocking or jarring to your body when there is a sudden loss.
Right.
Those who have had a long-term illness and there's been a gradualness, there's still a fatigue and there's still a shock, because when a widow's life had been fully wrapped into taking care of this person, and now they're gone, their time is very rattled. And where it is for us too, but we weren't having to take care of them.
Right.
We're now, as widows with sudden loss, having to take care of everything else. So there is this learning curve, depending on the situation, kind of where there can be more of a gradualness, where, as I've heard some people say, like, well, parts of them had died early. So for someone who, like, she could no longer go out and go to the mall. And, so pieces of the social part of being with someone starts to gradually wane or die out. So there's a gradual death with declined health. So they're not losing all of that at once, is what I'm trying to say. Is one better than the other? That is not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying that there's a grace in the gradual.
Right.
And that there's more of an expecting this kind of a thing.
Right.
When it's not expected and it's a complete blindside, it does something to your body in a way that is way more shocking, and it's a slow detonator, is what I'm trying to say. A bomb went off, it's still ticking inside you. For how long? It is how long you let these things sit in there until you want to address them. And that bomb's going to go off with these triggers, as we're calling it, all along the way. And this we're not sharing this to overwhelm any one of you, but I feel like the more we normalize this, the less scary it is, the less daunting it is, the less like, they said this is going to happen. Okay, this is normal. This is part of the phases of the body to remember it's safe. And so grounding is something that, I don't know if you do it. I wouldn't say I do it on a regular basis, but there is something, even with depression, that if you get your hands in the soil, there is a dopamine. There's a physiological thing that happens neurologically, folks, when you get out in nature.
Right. Even if it's just taking your shoes off and walking in grass.
That's it.
Breathing in the fresh air.
Yes.
There is absolutely a chemical trigger in the brain that makes the happy chemicals come out. And
you don't need a pill for that, folks.
Right.
This is a free thing that creation gives to us.
So you know, so the very first thing they wanted to do was help me. Let's give her this benzodiazepine, this Ativan, which great. Yep, it got me through a period. I didn't want to be on it forever. Not that it's a bad thing if people are. It's just, for me, I didn't want that. And, you know, but nobody said, hey, let's talk to you about box breathing. Let's talk to you about, you know, calming your mind down so that anxiety isn't so overwhelming. That was a journey I had to take on my own, just because it's so easy to write a script and hand it over. And, you know, well, eventually you'll get through these emotions and stuff. Just for me, I just did not want to be on medicine to cure that type of thing. I do unfortunately need it every once in a while, that medicine. But for my grieving, as with probably for most people who die in the line of emergency medicine services or in the military, is they also do annual memorials.
Okay.
And so every year in May is Police Week, and they honor the fallen officers in Washington, D.C. But your local departments have their own little day in Police Week where they have a service in their department. So Virginia Beach has theirs on the ocean front, and they play taps.
Yes.
They have the riderless horse. They do the gun salute. And the widows come and they place a rose inside the wreath in memory of their fallen officer. It is a beautiful thing. It is the most mentally traumatic thing for me to do year after year. I know I have to do it because I would never not honor my husband, but I have to psych myself every year.
I hear you.
This is coming. But it would probably be the same as, you know, that anniversary, and I hate that word, anniversary day of the day that you lost your loved one suddenly.
Right.
Calling it an anniversary seems awful because it's not a happy event.
Right.
But I don't have any other word for it.
You're right.
And so, you know, the anniversary day of his death is a trigger for me.
Yes.
If another officer is suddenly killed locally in our area, that is a trigger for me. And so, you know, there are other triggers that happen for other people, but for people who have lost a service member, I think you have more of those eventful type triggers.
Yes.
And so then again, you know, like I said, hugging is really difficult for me. So you go to this event, and what do people want to do? They want to hug you. And nobody knows that it causes me to tense up, because I would never say that. Of course, now I'm saying it on social media, but
until now,
and it's not. I'm trying to get better by it, but that initial reaction, like I was totally a hugger. And
this is called exposure therapy, y'all.
Yes.
This is where, when you become aware that this is an area that's bothersome, that you overexpose yourself to it to kind of deaden your senses, or allow them to see, like, hey, I'm safe. You have to have all this self-talk to say, like, we can do this. We can walk into this room. This is not happening again. We've grown up. We're now not the little girl that is scared and wants to be in a ball right now.
Right.
I know you're not happy to do this, but why do you do it? Because you love the man that it represents.
Right.
And so the love can lead us. The love can cover us. I truly believe that it is bigger than us. And especially if you have faith, there's a love that you receive when you ask Jesus into your heart.
Yes.
And I truly believe that it grows as you continue to serve and get your mind off yourself. The more you focus on others, not at your expense. Let me make that clear. We have done that wrong, where we overserve and we neglect our own physical health and care because we don't have time to get to it right now. And those bombs will go off because your body is saying enough is enough.
Right.
And so, but I completely I completely agree and have experienced it as well. And so for me, June is more of that month because everything's in June. So my birthday's in June. Our wedding anniversary is in June. His death anniversary is in June. So there are certain months of the year that I say are highly emotionally charged months. So my emotions in February, even keel. Closer to the end of the year, like this. And so if you know that ahead of time, we can do some self-care things, whether it's getting away, whether it's going to the beach, whatever it works for you, whether that's going to a quilting, thing, and you're using your hands to knit. These are the things that start to calm our nervous system. And this is good. These are good things that we can do to heal is really the term, and to help our nervous system pull out, because one of the things that I have learned is that there is this fight or flight. We hear a lot about that, but the parasympathetic part of our nervous system is the rest and digest. Rest and digest. That is really the healing side of our nervous system. If we stay in fight or flight, and Terri takes all the medicine and does all the things, if she stays in fight or flight, it's never fully doing the healing full circle thing. It's not working the system all the way through. And that's why I say you can't just do the head work. You have to do the heart work. And the final step is the body work, because it's not fully out of us until the body has released it. That is why we're built to ingest food, digest food, and release. I think that is truly the same for us in all these other areas. We have to take in information. She had to take in information about her husband. That took a while to digest. Even longer to release it. These are the practical ways where I'm dumbing down, if you want to say, is how I say grief. How can we take a complex topic that feels so dense, so meaty, and how do we tenderize food? We beat it with a mallet. Right? Exactly. We beat it to tenderize it to the point of what? A more it's easier to eat, digest, let's say. So yes, this, to get to the good stuff, takes a beating sometimes. And it's hard as a female to feel like the beating never stops sometimes when these reoccurring things are happening. Haven't I already been through enough? Why do I have to do this again?
And then, so I remember a new widow and meeting another widow for the first time, and she said, the first year is going to be hard. The second year is going to be worse. And when you hit year 5, it's going to all happen all over again. And I was just like, why are you telling me this? She was so right. Everybody experiences it differently, but sometimes the 5th year of being into a widowhood is worse than it was that first few couple of days of being a new widow. At least I found that true for several widows I've talked to. I don't know if that's been true for you, but
it was probably year 3. And I've read something about this too, that the brain kind of accepts that they're gone, but then there's still this like piece that feels like if you do this thing, they're going to come back. There's this coming back, like they've gone on a trip. They're not really gone. And when we built our gym and we moved into it, which was 2020, and so that was 3 years later, it was so disappointing. And that was a surprising experience. I didn't see it coming. Some were even more devastated, basically. Like, I thought he was going to walk in the door if we did this. Like, the work's going to bring him back. The work. You did all these things. And it didn't happen. And it was devastating. And I was like, wow. And again, back to this, my curiosity of the brain and how we process things, and how it knows they're gone, but still longs for them to come back.
Right.
And a lyric that I have written is the longing for belonging.
Right.
She had her best friend, y'all,
Yeah.
her soul person. And that's not every spouse's story, okay? But we do talk about soul ties. And, you know, and what I want to believe is his soul is still alive.
Oh, yeah.
So why is this soul tie still there? Because it's alive still. And they're just in different realms right now. And one day that will change.
I do believe so. It was probably the 5th day after Mike had been killed. I was looking through photos to give to the funeral home, and when he would come home from work and I would be on the computer doing whatever, I was a nursing instructor as well as working in the emergency room, so sometimes I would be doing a lesson plan. He'd come home at 2 a.m. and he'd come in and kiss the back of my neck, and I remember looking at these photos and I truly felt him behind me, like kissing the back of my neck, and I thought, that was his final goodbye. That was his, because when you lose somebody traumatically sudden like this, that they're 36 and they're healthy and you weren't expecting them to die. And yes, I know he was in a career that was very risky. It just, we were never raised to worry about that kind of thing. That happened to somebody else, you know, but that was stuff you saw on TV. That wasn't going to happen in your world. I think that's a protective measure for some of the wives of police officers, firefighters, and military. But yeah, you know, him kissing the back of my neck and then suddenly just like, I just felt like that was his little last goodbye, and I needed to believe that. And every once in a while, you know, even still, I'll see like a sign, and I'll be like, oh, that's something my husband would have done. Or my mother-in-law, she truly believes that if you find a penny just randomly in the parking lot, that is a wink from somebody in heaven, whether it be her husband or mother, her son. And so I've kind of taken that on, and it did help my children when they were younger to be in a parking lot and they'd be like, Dad saying hi. And you know, and those are all good healing things.
And they feel superstitious to some people, but I really confirm with her, and I've known other people that found dimes after their brother passed. This dime started showing up. Then they lost another brother. 2 dimes started showing up. And I said, what's the reminder that you're loved and you're not alone? That is more of the language that I would use. If it makes you feel happy that it was your spouse that came to visit you, but the presence ultimately, I believe, is the Lord. It's his omnipresence.
Putting in your path.
Exactly. There is a presence that is a good presence protecting you and sending you these little love taps, this little wink to say like, hey, I see you. You're not alone and you're actually loved. Because there's something in a widow's story that the isolation starts to tell you a different story. That the love that you had is gone forever. You will never love like that again, or you'll never experience the expression of love like that again. And also that the presence isn't there. That person's not there. So how can we express love without presence? And that has, and then it turned into a rhyme for me, that the present is the present.
There you go.
Because we can future trip or past. We can live in the state of mind where we're always in the past, which a lot of widows do.
And
can you speak into that?
Yeah. So I know that in the beginning I was looking back at photos and reminiscing, and you know, I'll never have moments like this. We were going to grow old together. We're not going to have those type of moments. But because of my faith, and I was just always taught that you shouldn't live your life in the past. You should live it in the present. And even though, you know, visiting those memories and letting them have good feelings or negative feelings, you should not stay behind. God did not mean for us to live in our past, and for any length of time that way. And so that's how I kind of got out of the mentality of just wanting to, you know, go back into the before I became a widow stage. you know, and there will be times where I'm like, you know, you grieve when your children graduate high school, when they graduate, when they graduate college, when they get married, and your spouse isn't there, but you do things like, so for the wedding, we had a table designated, not just with my husband's photo, but with grandma and all the people that we had lost, because we wanted to feel their presence. And if a photo made that happen, it was a nice, sentimental thing to do.
I've been to weddings with that, and it was
and
beautiful.
I know, you know, we talked about it last time. My mother was not somebody who talked about, if you lost somebody, you should not talk about them. Because that's going to keep you down and in the past and grieving. So you didn't talk. You didn't talk about her father being killed. You didn't talk about the loss of her baby. And so when my husband was killed, and I wanted to talk to my children about him and say, well, your dad would have loved that ice cream, or your dad would, my mother would be like, you need to stop doing that. And that was just her way of keeping on. I don't think that's a healthy way.
Right.
But everybody grieves differently.
That's right.
And it's certainly not my way to tell anybody how to grieve. But I do believe that, you know, venturing your past and experiencing those emotions are good and healthy, but I don't believe that you should stay there for very long, that you need to live in the present.
Yes. And the present was the struggle for me. The present was the struggle, because the present is where you have to wake up every day and realize you don't have the help anymore. The present is where you're having to take the kids to school. The present is where you're having to parent alone. The present is where all these things that could trigger you in the present. And so you do take medicine sometimes to numb out. And I am a little more of a fighter, and I said, I need to feel it so he can heal it. If we don't feel it, it hasn't fully done its work. And I took a class, and they said, look, on the Richter scale of pain, you may be holding it a 6, and you've learned how to manage that 6. But if you would just allow yourself to hit that 10, you might get down to a 2. And if you knew that pain point would pull you down to a 2 for the next 10 years of your life, would you do it versus staying at a 6? And I'm like, man, that's so good.
That makes a lot of sense, right?
It's hard in the moment, because if you've suppressed, you don't know how long you're going to feel sad. You don't know how emotional, how ugly crying it's going to be. And those curdling cries that no one wants to hear.
And who wants to do that to themselves?
Nobody.
Like, you're like, maybe I'll just stay at the 6 because I don't want to go there. But there is so much value.
There's a cost to staying at a 6. Okay. And it's real. And Terri said too that you have dreams.
I do. So I was raised not to think that people had premonitions, but I have no other way to explain that. Before anybody dies in my family that have been really close to me or my friends, I would have some type of dream that would alert me to that. And so I just took it as God preparing me that this is going to happen. So when I lost my best friend, I had a dream that he had passed. I didn't have the reason why he passed. It was just he'd passed. And I remember sharing that with my husband. And, you know, he's like, oh, no, we're all fine. We're good. And then it happened. The same thing for my husband. So my husband, I had a dream. It was probably 3 to 7 days before he was killed. I had a dream that he had been killed in the line of duty. I didn't know how, but I talked to him about it, and he was like, well, walk me through your dream. And I said, well, they came to the door and there was dirty laundry in the dining room, and I'm very OCD and my house is really clean all the time. I would never leave dirty laundry at the dining room table. And so he laughed and he's like, that, you know, that's fine. That's never going to happen because you would never leave that basket there. Well, we had gone to the beach the night my husband was killed. I had taken the boys to the beach, and I'd left the beach towels in a basket on the dining room table because we got home so late and I was exhausted. And so that kind of came true.
Wow.
And I had dreamt about my grandmother passing. That came true as well. So I've kind of just look at it now as this was just God's way of preparing me for something so shocking. It doesn't happen to everybody I've lost, but it's happened significantly enough for me to kind of be aware of. I think it's just God's way of preparing me for that.
And I didn't. I'm not a dreamer, so that isn't a thing for me. But I know after my husband passed, there were those who were not settled with the situation, were unsettled. I mean, by the situation of the suddenness of it all, and couldn't really wrap their head around it. And he visited them in the dream,
right?
And it was a positive dream,
right?
So they kind of settled it, basically.
So I do have dreams of my husband, and those are the best. Those are the best dreams now that we'll just be walking on the beach holding hands talking about the children, and I'll wake up and I'll be like, this was such a gift. Thank you, God.
Yes.
It's such a gift because it felt so real. And so I have had those dreams with him, and I'm so grateful for them. I wish everybody could have that, because it is nice to all of a sudden just have that little piece of just comfort. For me, my husband was my soulmate, so I have never even thought about a relationship. I've not dated. I'm never planning on remarrying. Not that I don't think I deserve that. I just love him too much and too deeply to even think to try to commit somebody else into my life in that type of regard. But my children in the beginning, they were like, they were terrified. We don't want another guy to come in our life and take over dad's role. And I was like, well, that's not going to happen. He was my soulmate. That's not going to happen. That's a worry you don't need to have. And they're in their 20s now. And so one of them recently, they were like, Mom, we hate that you're living alone, and wouldn't you like to have somebody else? And there are times where I'm like, yeah, it'd be nice to go to the movies or something, but I still love your dad so much. I just don't think I can. And I'm so happy for the widows and widowers who are able to move on and have a second relationship. I just have known from a very young time that was not going to be an option with me. But people say the darndest things. Like within the first couple of hours of him passing, well, you're young, you'll find a new love, don't you know? And you're like, why are you saying this? Like, I am grieving. Why are you saying this? But it's the same as, them saying to a 10-year-old boy, you're the man of the house now. It's what we were taught to say, and
I had to shut it down.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, no, man, no, they're not.
Right.
So it happened.
It was hard for me because we were taught to be respectful. Yeah. So, I'm not going to tell another officer he can't say that to my kid, but inside I'm cringing, and like, you don't have to be the man of the house, know. But he took that to heart, my oldest son.
And what are they doing now?
Oh yeah. So he's a firefighter, paramedic, dive medic, married, and has one beautiful little girl, and super proud of him. He owns his own business as a dive company as well. And he went through college and has his master's degree. I'm just super proud of both of my boys. My youngest son, who was 7 at the time his dad was killed, he was the one I worried about the most. He actually is a sheriff's deputy. He does drone policing, which is a really high skill to have. And he has a son and a girlfriend, and she has a daughter. So I technically have 3 grandchildren, and I'm a happy grandma. But when you had such a fear, when I had such a fear that my children were not going to walk a good path because of the trauma that they experienced, to know that they are incredible members of society and have such huge hearts, that to me was the best gift God ever gave me.
Absolutely.
And if I take any we talk about how hard it is for me to think of myself as a warrior or somebody strong, but if I can take away anything, thank you, God, for giving me the strength to have these boys turn out to be such great men. Because when you are a woman raising boys and turning them into men is sometimes very challenging, because how do you teach a man to be a man? I didn't have the skill sets my husband had, so we had to use YouTube a lot. The car broke down, I'm like, okay, YouTube. The washing machine broke down, okay, YouTube. Or we drew on other resources. But I'm very, very proud of those boys for all that they've gone through and their accomplishments.
And this is what resilience means, y'all. I mean, resilience, I've heard it from different people. They don't really like the term. But how do you grow resilience? How do you grow your capacity to handle more? By carrying more. that's really what happens. If you understand anything about weights, to build resistance, to build strength, means that we have to carry a little bit more, and the more you carry that, you're like, I think I can go up to the next weight now.
Right.
And there's this kind of shredding thing that's going on in your body where it's stretching stuff and it feels sore, and there is this ebbs and flow. But the more that you put yourself in that place, the more you feel that actually you're getting better. You're growing in something, and you can continue to change and evolve. And that happens in our hearts too, y'all. That's not just a muscle analogy here or a metaphor. This heart muscle, and it does feel bruised at times. It does feel that it's been stomped on. I felt like somebody had steel-toed boots on my chest for a good while. And it really shrunk my lung capacity. And it wasn't until I got into these workouts where they would call this move an open heart yoga, where you kind of do your hands like a butterfly, that started to stretch my chest cavity back out. And that was probably 3 or more years into the journey. And you don't realize how restricted certain parts of your body becomes, which is very, very normal and common. But why it's not normal is that people aren't talking about it.
Right.
And so back to this thing of, well, we don't need to tell everybody our dirty laundry, Terri. They don't need to know that your chest feels like that. Just like when you have children, a lot of mothers don't want to share their horror stories of delivery and birth.
Oh, you forget the pain.
Yeah.
No, you do
you
not
don't always forget
the
pain.
pain.
And some do have a higher pain tolerance than others, for sure.
Yeah.
And was the pain worth it
Absolutely.
for the birth of these children? Yes, the pain is worth it, y'all. The pain actually can be used for fuel. That's how we grow in the resilience. And that is something I feel so strongly about, that we can leverage the grief. If you've heard me say this before, the grief can be leveraged, level it up, and say, oh, okay, I understand what you are. We're going to feel this so it can move through, and we're not going to feel like a victim of the grief.
Right.
We're not going to feel like a broken person because of the grief. This is a human experience. This is part of the human experience. The fullness of our humanness is to walk through grief, is to walk through love, is to go through heartbreaks. How do we grow as a person and become a better human? By going through things.
Right.
And if we never had any hardships, guess what, folks? For a widow, it is hard to relate, to connect with another human when you have had no hardship. Mm-hmm. That's who I was before. Mm-hmm. I was kind of the little good girl who followed all the rules.
Right.
And so the people who dealt with addiction or dealt with this, I can't relate to you. Mm-hmm. You're kind of weaker, actually, because you're not strong enough to manage yourself.
Right.
I was strong enough to manage myself. So there was pride, self-righteousness.
Oh, yes.
And then you deal with life, and you start to crumble in the midst of life. Mm-hmm. And you realize, oh, I'm not as big and bad as I thought I was.
Right.
And some of us, we have to pull up our big girl panties. Mm-hmm. And I want to be the little girl and crawl into the fetal position in somebody's lap that's no longer here. Not that I ever did that with my husband, but now this little girl that's having to do things that feel scary, and you don't want to make a mistake, and you don't want to traumatize anyone else.
Right.
And how can you not make a mistake? How can you not traumatize anybody else? Because we're just hanging on, but you're trying to do it. And really, it's back to the faith and the journaling, that there is ways to not take control fully. I don't want to use that term fully, because control has a very resistance type of a thing. There is not the ebbs and flows. But I think the more that we kind of lean in and lean out, and it's more of a dance, I feel like the grief doesn't feel as jarring.
Right.
We can accept this as part of our story. It's not going to define us Some it may. This is the biggest thing that ever happened in your life, and it ends up being the biggest thing. But I just really encourage you listening to leverage that grief and learn how, as she said, to find the positive, find the good. What has it done? It's allowed me to connect with new people. That's good. It's allowed me to relate to people. That's good. That came out of suffering for me to relate. But I realized more of the world relates to suffering than love. I mean, people connect on pain. It's easy. And so I felt like it was my calling card. So I couldn't connect with people before, and now I can. And I'm not, and that's, you know what I'm saying. So I saw the blessing, is what I'm trying to say, in it, because there was compassion that grew out of it. There was understanding that grew out of it. The pride really went down. The humanness of this, the frailty of life, and the sanctity of life, and how precious time really is, and that we need to savor the time that we have, and to love the ones that we're with, because we really don't know if we're going to have them the following Sunday. And not assume that we have more time, but to really live in the present and enjoy the present that we have together, and to be thankful for another breath in our lungs, and to not take another day for granted, which is what I did. Hey, it works. Great. You know, like, my stuff works. And like, actually, it doesn't have to keep working. The heart doesn't have to beat regularly. It starts to not beat regularly. The digestive tract doesn't work as well as it used to. We have to now put in some intentionality to help these things keep working as they did in the past. That's frustrating to me in the aging process.
So I think, you know, because I've heard it from other people, so I think this is kind of a common thought process, is like, even though I'm 54, I still feel like I have an 18-year-old brain. Like, I still feel like I have a 20-year-old brain. And so, you know, when somebody, you know, calls you ma'am for the first time, you're like, what? You know?
I'm not.
And so it's crazy, that mentality of, you know, I'm getting older, and my body's not working as well as it should. When you get sick, and you get sick young, like I did with my autoimmune disease, I started just thinking, I've always been a God's not going to put more on your plate than what you can't handle type of mentality. That's how I got through a lot of my grief. But when I was diagnosed with my autoimmune disease, and it does have a life expectancy to it, I was just like, God, just please let me get my children to adulthood, and then whatever, just let me get them to adulthood and stuff. But I wake up every day, and I thank God for the night that I had. Like, I was able to breathe without needing a machine, or, you know, my pain level isn't as bad, or, you know, I'm able to get out of bed. And my story isn't the worst. There are people who live in wheelchairs or on ventilators. And I think being a nurse has really given me that ability to be like, okay, well, this might be awful right now in my head, but there are so many other people out there that have such worse medical problems and such from a younger age, that I'm just so grateful that I had what I had, and that helps me get through. That's so you know, but as we talk about this, you know, we just don't assume that your grief isn't causing you some kind of medical issue, because it will, because your body is always in that fight or flight for the longest time. And if you don't recognize it, it is causing inflammation in your body. And inflammation in your body is going to raise your cortisol levels and cause you all sorts of problems. Maybe not, you know, next year or the following year, but once you know, get older and older, it's going to catch up with you.
Inflammation turns into disease. And dis-ease in your body is inflammation. And dis-ease turns into disease. So that is a little bit of this journey, and it is it's a beautiful journey because of the complexities of it. And I tell people, what kind of books do you want to read? The predictable ones, or the ones that are a page turner, because you really don't know what's on the next page? Well, that's a widow's story. There is a lot of twists and turns. Well, as we finish up, Terri, do you have any final thoughts you want to share?
I don't. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening to me.
So I hope that you have enjoyed this. There was a lot more that we said in the other video. And I said, you know what, we're going to see where this goes. But I do feel like the health component is something I'm very passionate about, and I still don't believe is discussed. This is about women advocating beyond being a widow. This is about women advocating for your health, taking things into your hands. We can choose what we ingest. We choose that. There are things that we eat that make us a placebo feel better. There are people that feed their feelings, and those will catch up with you. You can over-exercise. There's people with all sorts of different disordered eating that comes out of these things. That's okay. Okay, that's okay. There are tools, there are people that can help. There's counselors, there's nutritionists, there's all sorts of things. We want you to know here in the month of May, Mother's Day, all these things, that you matter, and that when you're well, those around you will experience that wellness too. And it creates a value system where they're seeing that taking care is not just what you do or what I do, it's a lifestyle. That's a lifestyle. That isn't just a hobby to take care. It's a lifestyle, and to check in with yourself and to check in with others. And so just because she's 18 years in doesn't mean she wouldn't like a phone call once in a while, that she wouldn't like a card once in a while. They come less and less every year that passes.
Yes.
And they assume we're okay. But these anniversaries never get easy. Those anniversaries, I'm thankful for the very few that still send cards. And I got one last week on the anniversary of my father-in-law passing. So it wasn't even but it was still in the family. These are kind gestures that help you in those moments of dips to kind of level back up. And so you can do that for each other. When you get those obituaries, send the card. Put them in your phone. We have to put them in our phones now because we can't remember half the dates. Put these things in your phone. These intentional touches change people's day and change people's lives. It changes their lives. These simple acts of kindness change lives. And you've changed my life. You out there who have done the simple acts of kindness, cutting the grass, sending flowers, putting a little bread on my back porch. It feels nice to be thought of.
Right.
And that is something that a widow misses a lot because their spouse was that person for them. And so all of you out there get to kind of stand in and be that moment for us at times. And a lot of times we don't even know we need it until we receive it. And you're like, man, that felt nice.
Right.
That felt nice. So be that for someone else here in the month of May. Check on your moms and dads, everyone. Call your kids. And remember that you're loved and not alone. And stay tuned next week for more episodes with Mondays with Micah. Bye-bye.